and I hope you have a great time.
Hi, I'm the second moderator. I'm Atika Tasnem from Tokyo. So I'll be introducing the speakers today. I'm going to be screen sharing right now. Please let me know if you can see it. Okay, so we are EXISTOLOGY. So today's webinar, we are going to be talking about body positivity with 3 speakers and 2 moderators, that includes me. So this is in collaboration with Bear Lyfe. They are an organization who also spread awareness on mental health care, and they're very enthusiastic. I'm pretty sure you've seen their website if you have, if you have registered for this webinar. So our moderators are, I'm sorry. These are the speakers for today. I'm going to be going in depth later when their turn comes. And we are the moderators. That's me on left and that's Chahat on right. So I hope you guys enjoy this. So we'll start. Our first speaker is Dr.Anshita Singh Rathore. She's a counselor in Pune, and also she's a blogger. She also writes about mental health care, and let's hear more from Dr. Anshita. I'm going to stop my share. Dr. Anshita, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, this is Dr. Anshita. I am from Pune basically. I practice homeopathy and psychiatry. I'm also a counselor and I work with a lot of mental health issues, pediatric issues, and we do a lot of things actually. And this topic, this topic interests me a lot because all my life I have battled with vitiligo. So when you came up with this topic, and I'm extremely interested, and I thought I would talk about it. I would love to talk about it. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Dr. Anshita. Atika, you can go ahead.
Shad, do you have the questions?
No, you have to introduce. So you can start screen sharing. We'll introduce the other speakers.
I'll screen share. Our second speaker is Danielle Sheriff. She's Austin-based content creator, and she's the face behind Danielle Sheriff. This is her Instagram feed. If you're interested, you can follow her feed. She's really nice. I love her content, and she's also the co-host of Adulting Advice podcast. Danielle Sheriff, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, yeah, I am Danny. I live in Austin, but I'm from Australia, and I am excited to be here at this webinar and sharing with you guys my deep thoughts and opinions on this subject. So thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm going to be screen sharing again. So our third speaker is Courtney Smith. She's a 20-year-old journalist student. She's a 20-year-old journalist student. I'm so sorry. She's also the face behind Recall Red. Her feed is amazing again. You can follow her on her Instagram. She loves visiting new places and spending time with family. I'm going to be stopping my share. Can you introduce yourself, Courtney?
Yeah, so like she said, I'm a 20-year-old journalism student. I go to the University of Texas at Austin. So usually I'm also in Austin. I'm actually moving back tomorrow. So usually I'm in San Antonio, Texas. And this topic is obviously super close to my heart as someone who has gone through an eating disorder. And I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, guys. So we'll be starting with the questions. So the first question is, why is body positivity an important topic of discussion in today's day and age? And how can a child's parents, friends, or teachers help them to create a positive body image? So Courtney, would you like to start?
Yeah, so I mean, body image is incredibly important because I think especially like well, it feeds into like how, you know, we view ourselves, and it definitely affects mental health. Some people, you know, more than others, obviously. And you know, there are lots of studies out there that kids, you know, kind of are in touch with what like society thinks about like different body types and stuff from a pretty young age. And I think parents, one thing that they can really do well and help their kids with is like body and food neutral phrases and talk, like not referring to things as like, oh, like this is so bad, we're so bad, or like, oh, that's good, like keep doing that. Just being neutral about everything and letting, especially children, letting them eat what they want. Kids are very in tune to their bodies, you know, because they don't have that outside filter yet, really, like of what they're supposed to do. And so just like letting kids be kids and not like commenting too much. And when they do, keeping the phrases very neutral.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone would like to add to that?
Are we all covering this question, or should we
Yeah,
just?
yeah, you
Okay,
can.
then I'll wait.
I would like to add a couple of things. Um, no, the parents' own perspective of body image matters a lot. If the parents have been brought up this way, that they have been shamed about a certain skin type, color, body type, height, and number of things are there, especially in our Indian society. You know, we even have nicknames based on body type. You know, tiny ones are called Chotu and the chubby ones are called Motu. We have all sorts of nicknames for our kids. So we have to, you know, start from there basically. The education of the parents, the awareness in the parents and teachers first. I think that is your next question also. That we have to start from there. The parenting sessions about the same topic, the first thing, because it all begins from there.
Absolutely. Danny?
Yeah, really tying on to both of those answers, I think that the terminology that we're using is super important, and just really an awareness around what you're saying. When a child is so young, every little thing you're saying has the potential to become a core memory that shapes their beliefs and what they end up valuing and how they see what they're worth for the rest of their life. So for example, for me, one random visit from my grandmother where she asked me how I get home from school, and I said, I walk home, and she said, well, that's a really great way to stay trim. And then from there, that stayed in my memory as a child as like, I need to be walking places in order to be like doing the right thing. And so just being really mindful that even the smallest thing that you say in that phrase, so not just those nicknames, and not just like, oh, I'm on a diet or something like that, but even those just little tiny mentions can actually have an impact. So I think just that total awareness is really important.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add that as someone who did have vitiligo and someone who has psoriasis, I think it's really important to focus on the positive sides. And I think it's only because of the positive support that I had from my parents and from my friends at school that I actually didn't look down upon the disorders that I had. So I think, yeah, I agree with all of you. That's really important. Moving on to the next question, what is the difference between body positivity and body neutrality, and why are both of these important? Anybody would like to answer that?
Um, should I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Um, so what I feel about this is body positivity, body neutrality, and even self-loathing and self-objectification. These are all a part of a single spectrum. So the one side of the spectrum is self-loathing, and then comes the self-objectification. Then somewhere in the middle comes your body neutrality, which we have to learn properly. And at the other end is body positivity. So one has to understand, when one trying to understand the concept, one has to understand the whole spectrum, from where it comes, how it evolves, and what is our goal. The ultimate goal is body positivity, being beautiful from inside, feeling beautiful from within. But then neutrality is the in between stage, and before one goes towards positivity, one has to be neutral first. That's how I feel.
Courtney, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I like how she mentioned kind of like the spectrum, because I think a lot of the differences kind of like how someone is talking to themselves kind of like in those stages. And body, and some days, you know, you're probably a little bit more body positive, other days maybe more body neutral. But I do know, especially in like recovery from eating disorders and disordered eating, a lot of people do start out at the body neutrality, which is more like, this is my body today, like this is what it does for me, just kind of like it is what it is, sort of like accepting what you, not even so much accepting as what you see as like something that you're like really fond of, but just like accepting that like these are the facts. And body positivity moves into celebrating your body, which for different people can be hard for different reasons, whether it's trauma or eating disorders and things like that, or just negative body image in general. And so before people move into like the, oh, I love all this about me, like none of this kind of affects me, like I'm feeling super good about myself, a lot of times that natural first step is like, this is my body, it is what it is. So
Absolutely. Daniel, would you like to add?
Yeah, my experience with the body positivity and neutrality piece is, yes, like neutrality is a stepping stone. I feel like neutrality is for everybody. And originally, body positivity it is for everybody, but it was originally for marginalized bodies. And I think that it's helpful to have both of those phrases so that we can more easily have dialogue around like the separate conversations. And body positivity, you know, a marginalized body might be like someone in a disabled body, someone who is just ill, or somebody who, more specifically in this case, is maybe like obese, or not even, just in a bigger body, and they're still treated with some kind of discrimination about that. I think it's important for us all to be aware of that, especially in the medical field, because that's where they're really facing a lot of the issues, where anything they go into the doctor for, they're getting sent away with like, oh, just lose weight and go on a diet. And if you just took a second to maybe assess their vitals, or like test their blood work, you would see potentially that there's nothing wrong. And that's like all the way on the edge of the spectrum. And then there's like a little bit in between where like, yes, I know I need to do this, but I still would like support. And whereas neutrality is like for people in quote unquote normal bodies who just are having a really hard time in society with these ridiculous expectations that we have. So it is totally a spectrum, and the different words are for different reasons. And I think it's really helpful to have all of them in your vocabulary for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of critics of the body positivity movement who say that this promotes obesity and encourages unhealthy body weights. Are these criticisms valid, and is it okay to justify unhealthy eating habits by body positivity? Dr. Anshita, would you like to take this up?
Yes, certainly. Honestly speaking, body shaming is not helping either. So, justifying positivity and connecting it with the unhealthy eating habits is completely, it's completely illogical. Basically, when you feel positive about your body, which means you respect your body, you respect its functions. So, when you respect it, you cannot just have unhealthy eating patterns and unhealthy behavioral patterns. So one has to understand the meaning of body positive, because most of the people, I noticed this, even in my practice, I've seen that there will be some females or even men in particular, they say, we are as we are. So let's just enjoy the life and eat whatever you want, binge on alcohol, do whatever you want. This is not body positivity. They have understood it all wrong. Actually, body positivity is not about having unhealthy habits at all. And you respect your body, you respect the whole thing, the functions of it, the needs, proper sleep, proper nutrition. You have to understand that. So if they are understanding it that way, it's completely wrong.
Absolutely. Courtney, would you like to add?
Yeah, so with the critics, I'm always like, okay, well, I feel like if you're letting someone else's body affect you to that extent where like, let me sit here and attack the movement, it's like if you have your headphones on and you're listening to Taylor Swift and someone across the train is listening to Post Malone, like you don't know and it shouldn't matter, I guess. And as someone who a lot of times in my family, I have a lot of family members with bigger bodies, and I've seen the discrimination and the hate and the bullying, and it is a movement for, like Danny said, body positivity itself, was started by a marginalized body, specifically Black women. But it is like the phrases and the overall like feeling, like being like positive about your body, like in general, like loving your body and everything. I mean, there's nothing wrong. It's like loving yourself. And it's the aesthetics and the societal expectations that people are tripping over and critiquing, and that's the whole point. So it's one of those things where I think there's a lot more support for it, usually, especially with like social media, than there is hate. But that doesn't stop like the discrimination that a lot of people face. So it's one of those tricky things. But it's definitely not saying like, oh, you should be this way too, because it is like health at every size. Like you don't know how healthy someone is. There are definitely like there's all sorts of bodies out there, and it's kind of like judging a book on its cover, which I feel like everybody knows is wrong and people still try to do anyway.
Absolutely. Danny, what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous to say that body positivity is promoting an unhealthy lifestyle. I think that body positivity goes hand in hand with the health at every size movement, where it's really just like everyone deserves to be seeking health. Everyone deserves to be treated as though they're doing the best that they can. And like we said in the previous answer as well, to assume that someone is unhealthy based on their size is unfair. Some people will say, well, obese is like unquestionably unhealthy, but at the same time, are you saying that these people can't have a movement where they are treated as though they're doing the best they can, that they are in fact worthy of living a healthy lifestyle and making changes going forward if they were previously living an unhealthy lifestyle? I think that by critiquing this movement and saying it shouldn't be around, it's promoting an unhealthy lifestyle, you're saying, you know what, those people are doing the wrong thing. Those people need to change. Those people need to be different, but you're not allowed to support them on the way. And that makes zero sense to me. Yeah, that's my take.
I just wanted to add little off the topic, but I remember once I saw this picture on Instagram where there was a comparison between the before and after of a girl, where on the before side she was a little obese, and afterwards she sort of was slim, trim, and all those things that the society accepts. So the caption of the post was, if you want, you can. And I think it was a very popular one of those meme pages that you have on Instagram. And I sort of commented on that even if you don't, you're still beautiful. And it just blew out of proportion. That comment had so many replies, and mostly people saying that you guys are just lazy, and I can see you from your DP, and I know why you're supporting this, and you just don't want to exercise, you don't want to live a healthy lifestyle, this is bad, you will die. And I was just taken aback, because I thought that we were in that era where people still were, even if they didn't promote it, they were accepting of different body types. But I just realized that they weren't. And it was a huge shocker for me as well. So taking on from that, what do you think are eating disorders, and what are the main reasons for the development of eating disorders in people? I think, Courtney, we would like to start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, eating disorders can start from a very wide range of things, and they don't really know what causes them like 100%. And usually people cannot say like with 100% certainty, like, oh yes, it was this moment that really did it. And it's believed to be like a variety of different like biological, like genetic factors, socioeconomic things, like your experiences. And a lot of them do happen with other mental illnesses as well. So like anxiety and eating disorders, that's pretty much like what I've dealt with. People like trauma and eating disorders, depression, OCD, like whatever it may be. And unfortunately, eating disorders are what I think one of the, if not the most deadliest mental illness, and one of the top killers of young people. And I think, because of that, it is often portrayed as like a strictly like young women's disease, and that is not true. There are all sorts of different people who can get an eating disorder, and they are incredibly dangerous. And for me, like a lot of it started with disordered eating and habits, just kind of based on kind of the things we're talking about, just like different things in society, and like, my own personal probably genetics and perfectionism and all of that. And very quickly people can go from disordered eating to an eating disorder, and then you really don't have time to backtrack once you get yourself in that situation. And it is very, very difficult. And it is because it's a mental illness, and you're in it, and it's just one of those things that's very hard to get out of. Like, similar to like depression or something, like it's very hard once you're in it to like then climb out of it, which is why recovery and having so many different like body positive accounts and like amazing illustrators and recovery accounts is so important.
Dr. Anshita?
Um, I would like to just say that these things are very insidious. They come very slowly. And like Courtney said, sometimes there is a disorderly eating, just that. And then it turns into a full-fledged eating disorder. And most of the patients I have seen who have this kind of a disorderly eating, they often suffer from anxiety disorder, sleep problems, and there is a pattern that I've observed that they will be eating more when they are awake at night. They are not sleeping, and they end up eating all sorts of junk and comfort food, and this is how it begins basically. And it does come from a negative body image that they had since their teenage years, and that's why it's more common in girls, because our society stigmatizes and shames women more than women, honestly. It does shame men, but then the girls are more affected. Even the little girls, sometimes I see 10 and 11-year-old girls coming to us, and their mothers are complaining that she eats a lot, and I keep telling her not to eat that or this, but then they simply forget that they are children. They may not have control over their diet at that age. They may not have that discretion, but you have to tell them this is junk and this is healthy. And but then controlling the amount of food they eat, that becomes very difficult. And I've seen a lot of cases where they end up eating more and more, and having very unhealthy habits because they were restricted by their parents at that early age. So it kind of stigmatizes them. They feel guilty, but they keep on doing the same thing. They will feel guilty about it, they'll keep eating, but it never gets better until they seek some help, and then maybe some kind of an awareness improves their health. But this thing I'm observing in very small kids these days, even like 8-year-olds. So I think that's it.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Danny, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not in the mental health space or a doctor of any kind, so my opinion's not particularly helpful, but I would definitely say it comes from everywhere. And you, as a parent or an adult in general, could try to shape one area of the world and it's going to sneak in from the back. So constant vigilance is required to just be aware of, like we were saying earlier, the phrases and comments that you make on people. You know, if you're getting your child involved in a sport that's like weight class related, or if you get into a sport that is where your weight is a focus, but it's just everywhere. So I think that we need to be bringing in the constant dialogue to battle the constant dialogue of this is how you should be. And so us right now, right here, having these conversations, like these are the things that are important, because without these conversations, that's how all of these eating disorders are happening in like the sheer numbers that they are, probably.
Yeah, it's absolutely essential to have conversations. And taking up from that, how can one effectively recover from eating disorders? Dr. Anshita?
Yeah, I think this is a medical problem. So, as a doctor, I would say that it does require some medical help, not in terms of medication essentially, but counseling, creating more awareness, planning diet, and educating the family members, especially because those who are around you, they do affect these behaviors. For example, I have had some patients who developed certain things only after they were under influence of a particular friend or a family member, or they saw their mother doing something and they just started copying it out of anxiety. So it was a very weird coping mechanism they produced for themselves. So one has to educate the whole family, especially if it's a younger individual, and they need some medical help. Like I said, diet planning is very important. In some cases, I do prescribe medications. I'm a homeopath. I do prescribe homeopathy in batch flower medicines for such a case, because they always have some anxiety, guilt, even OCD like behaviors are seen along with eating disorders. It's very, very common. They may need supplements, because they need supplements also most of the time. So a number of things are required here besides the basic counseling.
Courtney, what would you like to say on this?
Yes, I am very much any type of professional help that people can get. And sometimes, there is a bit of a privilege issue there, or if someone, even I had a very difficult time like actually getting a diagnosis, because some of the behaviors are like, oh, you're so healthy, so it depends on everyone's situation. But I definitely think I always encourage people every time I do a Q&A, I'm like, please find a therapist, please go to someone who can really help you. And of course, a lot, there's nothing wrong with like kind of like being like, okay, like now I'm gonna start like recovery for a week, because you don't always find someone, right away. But I think as soon as you sense like, okay, I'm kind of going down a little bit of a bad path here, it's kind of it's time to start looking, because it's always like if you think you might be sick enough, you are. If you're like having those like, is this right? That's you in there trying to be like, no, like something's not okay. And personally, I went to residential, then I went to PHP, and then IOP, which are kind of like you go for a little bit, you're not there overnight type of things. And then I see a therapist and dietitian, and it's almost been 2 years since I went to the residential program. And I still see the therapist and dietitian. And I think it's so important, because eating disorders, they thrive on secrecy. They want to be left alone. And the more you leave them alone, even stopping seeing your therapist too early or not getting that help, it's incredibly important to actually get like professional medical and psychological help for these things.
Yeah, and why do you think there are cases of relapse? Like, what could be the possible reasons for those?
I think it's a highly addictive disorder. I've had counselors who have like compared it to like alcoholism, and it depends what it is. like which one. They're all a little different. For me personally, I struggled with like orthorexia and anorexia. And I had an exercise addiction, which especially in this day and age, you know, like you drive down the road, there's like 8 different fitness places. And being home and like with people like who support me and know like my situation is very helpful. But like the first day I was diagnosed, like my parents had to rip the treadmill out of our house. Like it could not be here because it is an addiction. And so I think with relapse, it depends. Some people I know, a lot of adults who have had like adults as in like, you know, living alone. So whatever age they are, um, it's hard because, you know, they are alone and all that accountability is like dropped on you. And how long you've had it and like the severity and stuff. Whereas, you know, when I came home from residential, like my whole family was here like, okay, like we're ready to go. We're ready to help you. And so I think the support system and just, and, you know, everybody's body and mind react differently, but and some people, the eating disorder gets mad at them, basically. They think it's kind of more their loved one getting mad, they back off. And unfortunately, eating disorders, I think when you enter recovery, they get angrier and they get worse before they get better, at least mentally. And so it can be very hard not to relapse, especially when people are put in triggering situations. But I think as long as there's a treatment team there and there's a support team there, I think that definitely helps.
Yeah, I agree that support is very important. Dr. Anshita, what would you like to say on this?
Yes, actually, I completely agree to that. The support system, family, friends, that they are extremely important because at some point of time, patients will stop the treatment, stop going to the therapist, and they may go into that vicious circle again, especially if they have been constantly objectifying themselves and they have that negative body image. Then they go into that binge eating, feeling guilty, and then anorexic mode, and this goes on and on. And then along with that comes other unhealthy habits also sometimes, like just panic episodes, anxiety episodes, and self-loathing, negativity, not being able to get into relationships. So these things just come in a cluster, I feel. So social support is extremely important, and I have seen that people who have good sort of social support, like from a family member and like their spouse or anyone, they do much better. They do much.
Okay, moving on. What are some unique challenges around body image that are faced by men, and how can people be more sensitized towards body positivity amongst men? Danny, would you like to take that up?
Yeah, sure. I feel like the men thing, it's definitely there and prevalent, but there is, I mean, just so much less of the pressure that there is of women on men. So I think that that's fair to say. But aside from that, I think as well, they just don't talk about it like we do. We're so much more open to discussing these kinds of things. And I thought about this question quite a bit. And I think that before we can really help dive men into finding community like we have started to find and support like we have started to find, men almost need to work more towards being just open about talking about feelings. It's almost like there's some foundational work that I feel like is missing, and we don't truly know the impact that's been having that's been made on men at the moment. It feels a little bit unknown because of how much they won't talk about it. I mean, anyone here who has a partner, a husband, a boyfriend has probably seen like glimmers of their bad body image days compared to the ones that we have, but we know that they have them. And I know that from the men in my life that they very much suppress their thoughts and opinions, and they're also more likely to be less aware that it's not them, it's society. They are very much like, well, it's my fault because I haven't been doing XYZ, blah, 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 blah. That's all just my anecdotal experience from the men in my life, but that's what I've noticed. So I feel like a conversation more about just like, how are you feeling today? It's important for them to be safe to talk about anything before we can even dive into this particular issue. But they're definitely affected by Hollywood, guys with ripped abs, guys on, the front cover of magazines, all the exact same way that we are. There's just something different about the way that they can talk about it and realize that it's not them, it's society.
Absolutely agreed. Courtney, what would you like to say on this?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything she said, especially they still deal with the magazines and the media and stuff too. I think with men there is a little bit less. I think with women there's kind of like two different types of body types that are like pushed on us, kind of like more of like the Kardashian style of body, and then the very just like slim, kind of lean, like more like stereotypical like model aesthetic. And it's kind of like, these are the best, now try and be one of these. But with men it's pretty much like you look buff or you don't, and obviously like their body probably doesn't have as many things that can be like manipulated and stuff. So they definitely deal with that, but there is clearly a problem with how we're talking about it and how they are not talking about it, and the help they're getting, because throughout eating disorder treatment, I probably ran into about like 50 or so patients like myself, and there was one male. So, and obviously, I live in a really big city, and this is at the time, it was the only eating disorder clinic in the city. So to only have one male, and he was like basically shoved in there by his wife, like she like made him go. So and I know there are more. I think a really good account he's recovering from an eating disorder. Gavin Gets Better, if you're kind of more interested on like the male experience, because obviously I can't really speak about it too much, but I will say that they definitely have more of like that buff kind of body type pushed on them.
Absolutely. Having a conversation is very important. And I think men at the same time are sort of suppressed because this entire toxic masculinity issue where they're told not to be emotional about things and those things, I think that really affects their body image as well. Dr. Anshita, what are your final views on this topic?
Um, Actually, in my practice, I see a lot of men coming up with this issue of hair loss and early baldness. So that is one kind of problem I deal with a lot. So I would like to talk about that. And
Sure.
recently, I'm sure there was movies about this topic, and which was, I mean, I really thought that it is quite a thoughtful of the directors to make such a movie on this topic, because it is so real. And typically in this Indian society, where marriages are arranged, so one has to have good hair. So this balding and these issues are a big issue in the Indian society, especially. And then skinny shaming, and these negative, thoughts about being skinny is another issue that I see in a lot of men. And they end up going to gyms and having a lot of supplements, and then ruining their health sometimes even. And they are kind of pressurized to go to gyms for the same thing. You have to bulk up a little and look like this, look like that. So in the urban areas, I do see such problems. And then there are other things like some things which are not that common, like having less of body hair, especially the facial hair, less of a facial hair. And then there is shaming about skin color also in some parts of India, especially. So this is the problem men do face, but if you see the number of men who face this is still much less than women, because the women has to they have to undergo so many things. Even I remember one incident when my grandmother. So I had these glasses since a very early age. I had myopia. So she was like, कि, "अरे शादी में problem आएगी." I will just translate that she meant that you will have some trouble when you get married, because you will be rejected because of the glasses. So I was like, "Baap re, wow, what is this?" So yes, certainly men face less challenges as compared to us, but they do face these challenges. Lately, they have been more conscious about their social media image. Because of the social media, obviously, they have been more conscious about it. So it is good to be conscious, but then this negative impact is bothersome. It's really bothersome.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned something about skinny shaming. So taking up from that, why do you think skinny shaming is ignored even by advocates of the body positivity movement? And why is it important to include skinny shaming in the movement? Dr. Anshita, we'll start with you.
The topmost reason for skinny shaming not being taken that seriously, two things are there. The first thing is there are more overweight, obese individuals. So the population is more directed towards that part. Second thing is this kind of thing does not sell. It does not make money. So if you see in mainstream media also, plus size clothing is sold, and beauty pageants for plus size women is something that sells. And then if you focus on the skinny women, they have nothing to sell there. So that's the reason media does not pay that much of attention to that part and that strata of society. This is one big reason. If they have something to sell to the skinny women, they'll start paying attention. They have something to sell to the bald men. They have treatments for baldness, they have hair transplant, so they will focus on the hair thing, right? So when they have to sell something, they will pay attention to that. But it is us. We have to pay attention to that skinny shaming and those skinny people, and create the awareness about it, because the society will not. It is not selling. That's it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Courtney, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would say that, anyone's body can be shamed and like anyone can be told or like, very toxic things about themselves, but not everyone's body is or can be, marginalized. And I think that's a big reason why it's left out, because a lot of the creators I've seen that are in bigger bodies, they're like, well, I'm the one whose employment can be affected, whose healthcare can be affected. And usually like a thinner person isn't going to have that experience. And that doesn't mean that, especially like when you're in school, I mean, people can be ruthless. Like, you can still be made to feel bad about yourself. But I know when I was at my thinnest, there was not a single day where I was skinny shamed. And it is a problem, and people that, do get shamed about that, whether it's their family or their peers, like I said, that can definitely be that can make them feel bad about their bodies, and it can definitely give them like, disordered eating or, bad body image, etc. But it's usually the bigger bodies or the just the different bodies, like disabled or different things, that can be marginalized. And I think that's probably the biggest reason why it's left out. I know, at least within what I've seen.
Absolutely. Danny, what do you think can be done to help someone who has been body shamed or is being body shamed?
In any way, not just skinny
Yeah,
shaming?
not just skinny, but anyway.
Yeah. So my whole thing, I mean, that's just my whole thing, right? I'm not a healthcare professional. I am just a victim. And what's helped me is community, right? I just need to be around people who understand me. I need to be around people who are thinking what I'm thinking and to not feel alone. I think that's so important. Like, you're getting your professional help, your whole family's on board. But if you are the only person having your thoughts and feeling your feelings, it's very, very lonely. So I think removing that feeling of loneliness, creating that feeling of community and accountability is really helpful. So for me, I started creating artwork, and my thing with that is I feel personally like I'm very good at knowing exactly like the thoughts that many of us have had, putting them into words that you can comprehend and validating people. And something about my ability to validate other people's feelings has helped them tremendously. And from there, I get emails, messages, calls all of the time about how much it helped. So I believe that supplementing people's professional journey, and they need to come at it from a lot of different angles. They have to get help from others, support from others, and be consuming curated content online if they're going to be online that validates their journey and how they're feeling. So for me personally, it's my mission is to create that for others because I think it's super important.
Totally, that is very important. Courtney, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think for people that are, you know, being body shamed, I mean, I really think validation and community, like she said, is the most important thing. And I feel like that's kind of what it is. I mean, you know, society, like I do think, you know, eventually we will come around. You know, there's always going to be the outliers and the haters. But for the most part, I feel like although it is a battle and there's definitely conversations that need to be had, especially like regarding like healthcare and like the actual like marginalization of certain bodies, um, it's kind of like finding your supportive circle. And if somebody is like triggering or not validating to you or not helpful, there are definitely conversations that can be had, and how to like kind of have your inner circle like be more supportive and like how to find like those creators online and stuff. But you know, sometimes you do have to kind of like reassess like who you're with and what kind of social media space like you're putting yourself in, and that's around you, and kind of like take inventory. And sometimes, you know, that means cutting some people out a little bit or like blocking some accounts or whatever, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I agree. There are some terms such as plus size or too skinny or petite that are used to address people of different body types. Do you think they have a bad connotation and can affect the mental health of those individuals?
Yeah, I think some can. I mean, I'm always I mean, you can't really tell on this, but I'm about 5'1". And so every woman in my family is really, really short. And some of the guys too, although they wouldn't like me saying that. Um but I never really like I was never that affected by the word petite, because around, or at least like the malls I've gone to, the petite section is always kind of like the older woman section. So I always kind of thought of it as something like older, but I do like sometimes I'll say that instead of like thinner or like smaller, like when referring to like especially like my mother or something. I think I just kind of put it with like more of like an older box, just because of like how I've seen it in stores. But I think plus size is like complete BS. Like I don't think they should call it that. Like she had said before, like that sells, and so they're trying to be like, oh, okay, but like the average size of women in most countries is considered like in a plus size, and some stores they don't even put it online. Like they put it online but not in store,
Sure.
and things like that. I think that can definitely affect people's body image more, like being called like plus sized or like things like that, than just being like, oh, like that person is thin. Like they can definitely start to like personify that, be like, oh, I have to stay thin because thin is good. But I feel like, you know, what probably affects people more like consistently is the plus size. And I know like there's a store called Altered State, and their regular sizes are just altered state, whatever. And then their plus size, they were calling it a beautiful soul. And I was like, I don't really feel beautiful. Like, I was like, anyone else feel like that's kind of like, I don't know. I was just like, you can't go for like, oh, this is altered state and this is a beautiful
Beautiful.
soul. I was like, are you kidding? Like, I was like, well, I'm putting the scrunchie down. Like, I'm not buying this anymore. Like, I just felt like that is like, to me, that's like it was just so like fat phobic and terrible. And it was such a like eye-opening experience. Because usually like plus sizes like are kind of already in stores or they're just online. Like I'm not in that size, so it's not something I've totally had to think about. But like seeing them be like, our new plus size range, a beautiful soul. I was like, okay, guys, like there's still definitely some work to be had. And I think that, like, I was like, that can seriously affect someone, especially if they're at a vulnerable age in their life. Like, that was terrible to me. So I think that end of the spectrum is probably a bit more affected.
Dr. Anshita, what about you? I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Okay, yeah, I would just like to add that um, fat or petite or skinny, these are just the adjectives. And you cannot let these adjectives define you. You have to have a definition of yourself. If you have a definition for yourself, if you know building a yourself, not because if you are objective, I would say.
Danny, what about you?
Yeah, I think both of those answers really hit the nail on the head, right? The words are, or the names, the adjectives are actually kind of whatever. It's more about for me and my experiences and my friends' experiences, that it's when you don't allow some words to apply to someone else. So like a beautiful soul, it was just like that. My jaw dropped. I'd never heard that, but that's absolutely ridiculous. It's taking everyday words and manipulating them in that way to then that's just so much more offensive. And I almost don't know how to put it in words because I'm still just like absorbing that story.
It's
But
bad.
yeah, it's really bad. Yeah, like the body positive space, like a lot of them prefer to just be called like fat or like just using those words. But if you say that does that already make sense? Like I feel like it's just the word. It's your choices of words and how you exclude people from certain groups or how you awkwardly include them in others. It just we need to level the playing field, I suppose, is what I'm saying here, right? So like, why does a brand need to have a certain name for their plus size clothing? Why can't it just be all in the same shop so that we stop creating segregation? Like that's just segregating people in the shop. There's no reason why that name, even why beautiful soul even needs to exist. And so, and I mean, I don't know why they can't just make all of the clothes in all of the sizes. I'm sure that's a different conversation, but I think it's when they're separating you by using or not using terminology that all of the other normal people get to use. Sorry about
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think as someone who has been fluctuating between my weights, I think that's really important. And also the fact that a lot of these stores have these huge banners where they say plus size clothing available here. That is something that I think that's ridiculous, and it should be available everywhere. And it's not, yeah, as you said, it shouldn't be a separate section for those people. And I think all of us, I think personally, I have been hearing a lot of things like you're too pretty, but just lose a couple of kilos and you'll be fine. I think that is something that a lot of girls have been hearing since a really long time. So how do you think social media influences somebody's body image? Courtney, would you like to take that up?
Yeah, I think it can hugely impact people's body image. I think this generation that's kind of coming up behind me, since I'm 20, so everybody that's kind of like a younger teenager now, the decisions they make and the communities they have available to them online, I think are better than I feel like Instagram started when I was a baby. I was my first my Instagram account, I got like my personal one I got when I was like 10 or 11, and Instagram was very, very new. So there wasn't like body positive influencers and like eating disorder recovery pages. It was like weird, like it was like kind of like the more negative stuff. They didn't even, the pro Anna stuff was there. I didn't really know what that was like at the time, but I kind of like would see it floating around some of my friends' pages a little bit. But it was very much just like, here's an oversaturated picture of me and my dog, you know, kind of like the little baby parts of it. But if people are seeing like, oh, like this influencer is like so, like she's so thin and she's got all these followers, especially like as a young person, and like who has the most followers, you know, like the Kardashians and the celebrities and the influencers, and they, most of them do look a certain way. And especially and there's of course like cyberbullying, just like all sorts of things that can affect people's, and those terrible like health swap photos and stuff people do. It's like, I mean, it's like, I promise you, like air popped popcorn with no salt is not good. Do not do it, you know? So, but you know, when you're young, you don't know that. And those were really hard for me to see, like all the different like health pages. And half the time these are ran by people who are not professionals. They have no idea what they're talking about. And some of the influencers, like, I mean, I didn't know what photoshopping was when I was 11, you know? So I think young people, and again, you know, sometimes, you know, the parents, I think it'd be good if they kind of like talk to their kids and like see a little bit about what they're following. And for like people who are a little bit older, have some more autonomy and everything, you know, being mindful of who you follow and don't follow, and muting accounts, making a point to tell your algorithm you like positive content and good content, things like that.
Dr. Anshita, would you like to add anything?
I would like to say that if there was no Photoshop and similar apps, life would have been much, prettier. I would call it prettier, because things would be very natural. And these days, what the trend I see is every single picture, even if you take a basic selfie of yourself, it is kind of modified to look a little fairer. And no, I'll tell you one thing. Sometimes in my practice, I tell my patients to send a picture of a certain thing. For example, if they have a skin issue, I'll just tell them to send a picture. And if they take a picture in that selfie mode in their phone, it is automatically clarified and enhanced. And I'm like, what are you saying? There's nothing here. And we are like, wow, the cameras are built in such a way to make you look prettier, so that you share more, you spend more time on social media, you spend more time in counting the likes and comments on it and counting your followers. So basically this all all of these are interlinked. The cameras we have in our phone, the social media influences, everything is linked to each other, because the more pictures you take, then you have pretty pictures of you, and then you want to post them and you want to compare them with others, and you see the number of likes. Even small kids like 9-year-old, my son is 9 year old, so he would just, if there is a picture of him, if I post online or something he does, I post online, then he would ask me, Mama, what is the number of likes on my picture, and something like that. So social media so far is affecting us very negatively, actually, because there is oversharing, there is over commenting, there is over following, I feel. So this has to stop at some point, and some awareness needs to be brought in the children, especially, that what are you supposed to share, what is the relevance of this, and how does it matter to you in real life. These things are important. And the influencers, social media influencers, need to have some moral responsibility, that what they are sharing, how does it affect the society in general, because there is no moral responsibility anywhere. This is what I see. Everywhere you see, there is photoshopped images of everyone, and just still bodies and such things. So some responsibility needs to be taken by the influencers, I feel. And I think workshops need to be done at that level. Social media influencers, teachers, and parents especially. This is what I feel.
Absolutely. Though social media has its negative effect, how can social media be used as a tool for body positivity? I think, Danny, I would like you to answer that.
Yeah, we definitely can't boycott it, because it's so curated and it's just designed for comparison. But we can't just boycott it, because then we're abandoning everyone in that space instead of trying to make a difference. So for me, it is, I post very few pictures of myself, although I do post them. It's just, I don't find that as helpful as posting content that is of value to somebody, just in a more of an emotional or intellectual way. And my most recent, I posted a comic most recently that actually got a little bit of confusion and criticism from some people, but it was that someone was scrolling through their phone and they saw a picture of somebody who is just like posed in a certain way. They're twisting their side on, they've got like their booty out for the world to see, but it's a very, like, their body is contorted to get into that position. And on the second slide, it's that person imagining that they've met up with that person in real life in a party, and that person is standing there posing in that exact same way while you're having a conversation with them, and you're just like, are you okay? And that's basically the moral of that story. Is we need to be going through social media through the lens of, okay, every single thing that I'm seeing is ridiculous in person. Almost like every single pose this person is doing is not real, like you were saying. And by the way, it's so interesting to hear about the Indian culture piece of this that people like me and Courtney are not seeing. Like, we're trying to make ourselves look darker over here. That's for sure. But I am trying to use social media as much as I can to point out these things and be like, hey, are you noticing this is what you're thinking and feeling when you're consuming this content? Or, hey, I know influencer XYZ said this, but I'm an influencer too, and I'm showcasing this influencer and this one who is promoting a more positive message. So I think that we can use it to amplify the messages that we want the world to be seeing, straight up.
Absolutely. Courtney, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think one of the good things about social media, kind of like I said earlier, it has evolved because it's gotten older, and there are so many different like accounts you can follow and stuff. And also just being aware about like Photoshop and stuff. My original goal with my blog was to make it look like a lifestyle blog, so people didn't feel like, so it was kind of like it would attract more people. Like, I would get people to be like, I've never like thought about that, like I'll check that out. But also because when I was looking for like recovery stuff to follow, I didn't really like to see a lot of food content. I think that's kind of like breeds a little bit of comparison there. And some accounts were like so like visually cluttered that I was like, ooh, like for me, like I don't really like a lot of visual clutter. I just want everything to look kind of clean and stuff. That's a little bit of my own perfectionism. But I was like, the more it looks like a lifestyle blog, and we're kind of like, no, this is normal too. Like, this isn't like a weird thing to follow. Like, you're not like, this is a really cool space to be a part of. And I'm very much like vehemently against photoshopping. I mean, of course, like there's certain things like if you add butterflies, like that doesn't really count. Like, that's a stylistic choice. I do think that there was an influencer that added a ton of wildflowers and stuff to her photo, and honestly, like at first glance, it looked real. And personally, like I would choose to disclose those type of things, because all of her pictures looked so like idealistic, and then like they were like all fake. I was like, what? But like as far as like body stuff, I like to choose filters that really just like add like the like tints of like orange, like, but they don't do anything like to my body or my face, that way everything looks good. But I had a photo up the other day that a few people were like, wow, like I was really happy to see that, because the way it filtered, like it just like added like some light in the shadows and everything. It like emphasized like a spot on my leg where I had some like cellulite that you probably wouldn't have seen if it was just kind of like the regular shot my boyfriend took, and so sometimes certain things can be helpful to people, but as far as like the filtering of the body and like the cinching of the waist and stuff, it can be very discreet, and it's those things that are super harmful. So I think people just have to be like very vigilant with who they're following.
Absolutely. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to share? And then we can move on to the questions from the audience.
Chad, I would like to add one point.
Yes.
Recently, not recently, I would say since probably 3 or 4 years, I have noticed certain women's group on Facebook, particularly who have been promoting this kind of thought. like body positivity, and they're against shaming, biases, and more inclusive. So I am very lucky to be a part of those groups, and I really hope that they include more men, and I hope there are more men's group which I may not be aware of. But recently, this positive change I have seen on Facebook, and there are many support groups also, and there are groups regarding fitness. They do motivate each other, and I mean there is a lot of positive things happening lately, and which is very recent actually. And that's what I would like to add. And even I tell to my patients sometimes that you should join this or this group for a constant motivation for doing something. For example, if you have a fitness problem, some back problem or PCOD, and you need some workout tips or diet tips, maybe you can join. So it helps because there are like-minded people there and people who have struggled with things. Then there are various support groups for anxiety, depression, and whatnot actually. So this is one positive change that is happening around. So that's it.
I think community building is essential to sort of combat this entire issue. Anybody else who would like to add anything? Okay, so if anybody from the audience has any questions, you can type it in the chat box, or you can tell us. We'll tell you when to unmute and ask the question. Are there any questions from anybody? You can unmute yourself and ask. Okay, so there's one question from Arman, and he asks, how does one inculcate good practices for body positivity in lockdown?
Can
So
I answer?
anybody? Yeah, sure, ma'am.
So I was waiting for that question actually. So I would like to say that most of the time we look at our body like object, something decorative, something that should look nice, pretty, and attractive to others. So if you want to be body neutral, body positive, whichever stage you belong to, actually, you have to look at yourself as a not as an instrument of as an instrument who has some functions like productivity, creativity, and some higher intellectual function. So once we start looking at ourselves as something intellectual and something that has functions in this world, we have come here for something relevant, then we will stop objectifying ourselves, and this shaming and these things, that these adjectives that affect us so much, they will simply stop bothering us.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anybody want to add on to that?
I will. Basically, everything that she said, essentially, you need to be doing things that help you validate your worth and your value, that it's not all in your body. In that outside world, if this is something you're struggling with, that means you've been putting a lot of pressure on yourself to be valued for how you look, how small you are, whatever your goal is. And this lockdown has been such a great opportunity for so many people to learn to create, to learn to do things with their hands. And when you do that, which is something so many of us have forgotten, like I can tell you firsthand, I forgot that I even liked to draw, that I liked to garden, things like that. When you do that, and it probably sounds like BS to a lot of people, but as soon as you do it and you finish something, you're like, wow, I have other functions. I am capable of all of these things. So I think to combat body positivity in lockdown, a lot of that is to be doing things that are completely unrelated to your body, that show you just how much else you're capable of doing.
Absolutely. So I think with that, we come to the end of the session. I thank all of the speakers for joining in, and we would request the participants to switch on their cameras for a bit so that, okay, sorry. Mahesh has a question. Mahesh, you can unmute yourself
Chahat,
and ask.
before we proceed, I think Dr. Anshita is going to be leaving because she has some prior appointment.
Oh,
So thank you, Dr. Anshita, for coming. We had a great time with you, and I loved hearing
For
from a
having me.
point
I
of
love
view
this
of a
opportunity
doctor. So thank you for coming.
thank you, ma'am.
so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, Mahesh, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, so I just wanted to ask that recently there's been a lot of talk about how Adele went through her body transformation and how she, has transformed as a person to a point where you can't even recognize her. And people talk about how she was all for body positivity and self-love, and how this transformation is, in a way, going against her own initial principles. So, what do you think? Is a transformation going against the concept of self-love and body positivity?
Yeah, I can take this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the stuff about Adele really bothered me, especially since, I mean, she's so talented and so beautiful, and it's like, I'm going through a divorce, I can't even imagine. And people were just like, "Oh my gosh, like look at her," and I'm like, and I was a little bit like, okay, like she just got divorced, she's got a child and everything. It's quarantine, and like for me it was a little like, I'm very hesitant, especially after going through everything I went through, to like say, I really don't say anything about people's bodies, because you never know how healthy those behaviors truly are. I mean, maybe she just had more time for herself and has enough money to buy a personal trainer basically, and was just like, I'm gonna do this, like whatever. um but, and there are some questions like, well, why do you want to change your body, all those things. But there are definitely times, and unfortunately only that person can really answer like whether that transformation is for like, is like more natural, or for like a better, like positive reasons, or if it's something that is disordered, or they are struggling with an eating disorder, or similar behaviors. And I think it's really important that we as a society normalize really like not saying anything. And that doesn't mean like, obviously if someone, like their weight changes a lot and like they look nice one day, like whether it's they weigh more now or they weigh less than they did previously, there's nothing wrong with being like, oh hey, like nice outfit, or like, oh you look great, like whatever. But commenting on the weight gain and loss specifically, it can be very, detrimental, and it can normalize that amount of weight loss or weight gain. So even if somebody, like even if Adele, like who knows, maybe that's her set point, whatever. I don't personally think it is, because it's very, very drastic and very sudden. But if, the more we like don't really make it a thing, the less it'll be. And it can really, like Danny mentioned earlier, these little things can affect kids a lot. So a 12-year-old girl or boy seeing that, like, oh, like that got so many compliments, like that must be so normal, and it's really not. A lot of that has to do with her just like ability to buy a fitness trainer and probably a chef, and we don't know about what she's doing, like if she's restricting or anything like that. So I think the less we comment on weight, the better.
Yeah, there's so much context missing from her story. There's
Yeah.
so much context. I'm pretty sure she hasn't said anything about it, which is a good thing. This is her still standing by her principles in the sense of like, I did this thing and I'm not going to put it in people's face all the time. And I'm not going to talk about how it happened because it's not relevant to you. This is something I wanted to do for myself. I have my own reasons. And I think the more that we don't talk about it, like she doesn't owe us any kind of explanation. Do you know what I mean? So that's the first piece of that. And I think that that's a positive side of it. And it shows people, hey, yeah, like maybe there's a reason she's not talking about it, and maybe spark some curiosity in others to learn a little bit more about this kind of thing. But then also, like Courtney was saying, yeah, it's a pretty sudden change. So there is a very it's very unlikely that there are no consequences at all to that. And the one that comes to mind that I'm very outspoken in is hypothalamic amenorrhea, where it's the loss of your period due to an energy deficiency. And to lose that much weight in that time typically would tell me there's some kind of like massive energy deficiency happening. And if studies in HA have shown that you can lose your cycle with the loss of anywhere between 5 to 10 pounds, right? So she's definitely lost more than that. And my point of saying this is we do not know the consequences. And it really ties in everything we've been talking about this whole call, which is you don't know that her health is truly better this way. And unfortunately, a lot of people are like, good for her, you know, she's making a change in her health. And they don't know if that's even true. So there's just so much context. She could be having better health. She could have actually lost it for a health reason that we don't know. Or maybe she had an underlying health situation before, like a nutrient deficiency that was like making it just harder for her to create composition changes, or she had PCOS, which was making it harder for her to, we don't know any of these things. So like everyone should just leave her alone.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And just if you could switch on your cameras for a bit so that we can have a quick picture. Thank you.
Is no one else here?
Guys, I see you, Meghna. Okay. If anybody is willing to, then we can have a quick picture.
Oh, yeah, I'll do it. Just a second. I think we're good.
Okay, thank you guys, and thank you, Danny and Courtney, for joining us. It was an amazing session, and we hope everybody who participated had a good time as well. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, y'all were great. Y'all were so good.
I was so nervous.
No, man, it was all good. I mean, I didn't notice anything at all. Just like sense that you're on edge, but I won't notice anything for sure.
I
Y'all were
don't
great.
know.
Oh, that is.
I think Atika left.
Sure.
Hi, my screen's frozen. I've been so scared it would fuck up the meeting somehow. Hi. But it was so good. I'm so proud of you. And like Armin and I were discussing this, and we want to put like the entire webinar on YouTube or something because it was so insightful and so good. And very honestly, it's something I needed at this point because
Absolutely,
it's
same.
Yeah, it was really great. Actually, we should put this on YouTube for sure, because I think in terms of.
Also, I cannot stop recording. Can someone stop recording? Like, can you?
Okay, wait.
Because I
Yeah.
can't control
Okay.
my.